We are seeing more and more fresh produce from Peru in our supermarkets. From millennial crowd pleasers like blueberries and avocados, yes please, to humble asparagus. Both the range and scale of these products have simply exploded over the last decade or so. And that's because Peru has been busy. With vast reserves of land, plentiful water supplies, and favorable temperatures, South America's third largest country is well on its way to becoming one of the world's major breadbaskets. Now, since the turn of the century, its export economy has absolutely ballooned, driven by an exponential rise in foreign investment and significant public spending on agriculture infrastructure. The poster child of this transformation is undoubtedly Chavimochic, the name of which is an acronym for the four valleys that this megaproject will serve: the valleys of Chao, Veru, Moche, and Chicama in the northern coastal region of La Libertad. Its boldest objective, and this is why it's on the Megaprojects channel, is to convert over 600 square kilometers of unforgiving desert into arable land destined for intensive, export-oriented farming, so all of us millennials can keep getting those delicious, cheap avocados. Nearly a century in the making, Peru's largest agricultural project is nearing completion. Is it the jackpot the country has been chasing, or have the seeds of trouble already been sown? Good fun there, let's get into it. The pickle. Officially known as the Special Chavimochic Project, its primary design involves diverting the 316-kilometer Santa River as it winds through the northwest central region of Ancash in Peru to irrigate these four ancient valleys. Now, this project has been viewed as an engineering fantasy since the early 1900s. For millennia, La Libertad has faced severe droughts, intermittent Niño-linked flooding, and other dramatic weather variations. By the 1940s, however, the Peruvian government began taking the concept a lot more seriously. American engineer Charles Sutton was brought in to expand upon existing studies. Chavimochic's current layout is largely based on Sutton's original design, which features a master canal intake at the Santa River. Positioned over 400 meters above sea level, this intake provides the hydraulic head necessary to power a series of hydroelectric plants along the canal, stretching all the way to the Chicama Valley. More comprehensive studies were carried out over the next couple of decades, but it wasn't until 1968 that any real significant progress was made in the region, and that was under the new military dictatorship of General Juan Velasco Alvarado. By the 60s, change was in the air in Peru. Much like the rest of the world, the decade witnessed a rising tide of discontent. Students, peasants, and leftist parties found common ground to challenge the established order. In 1968, it was the Great Tsunami that swept through the nation. In October of that year, a bloodless coup was staged by General Velasco, who quickly set up a left-leaning government dedicated to tackling Peru's severe socioeconomic imbalance. For decades, if not centuries, Peru had been governed largely by an urban elite in the capital, in close alliance with wealthy estate owners across the country. A sweeping land reform, among the most far-reaching and comprehensive in Latin American history, saw the country's vast rural estates expropriated and then redistributed to the indigenous peasants who had labored on them for generations under semi-feudal conditions. La Libertad was no exception. Its large estates were dismantled, and they were replaced by cooperatives designed in theory to grant the peasantry greater autonomy and upward mobility, not to mention subsidized irrigation made possible by the planned diversion of the Santa River. What followed, however, was stalled efforts to deliver the promised water supply. The state took over existing irrigation systems, yet the anticipated irrigation available from Chavimochic never materialized. In fact, the complete nationalization of the water supply resulted in a loss of autonomy for the peasantry. They were forced to depend on Western-trained engineers and technocrats from Lima who employed European metrics and technical jargon. This shift harmed community relations. For centuries, rituals surrounding water allocation, surviving from the Chimu and Moche civilizations, had fostered spiritual and cultural cohesion among the indigenous valley people. Now that tradition was slowly being eroded by the state. Velasco's demolition of the plantation system, carried out partly for populist ends, is wonderfully ironic. Most peasants who transitioned from the plantation to the cooperative found that their material conditions remained largely unchanged. Likewise, those who never had worked on the plantations did not appear to fare any better. Fast forward half a century, and the same region would host one of Peru's most intensive agro-industrial hubs, a state-subsidized haven for export-led multinationals. Now, none of this would have been possible without Velasco's socialist land reforms and the nationalization of Peru's water. A plum job. Chavimochic became the proverbial can kicked down the road, its sheer scale posing a significant challenge for a developing economy that's already burdened by a whole lot of foreign debt. Political support for the project tended to surge during droughts, only to wane once the rainy season arrived. Can't look far ahead, can we? Politics, everybody. It was not until 1986, under President Alan Garcia, keen to reward his political support base in La Libertad, that actual construction finally began. The project was based in 3 phases, with completion expected over roughly a quarter of a century, subject to the ebbs and flows of public-private financing. Initially, the project funding was provided by the state and the Inter-American Development Bank. Phase 1 kicked off all the way back in 1986 with one clear objective: to irrigate the Great Chao and Veru valleys. This involved diverting the Santa River, capturing up to 105 cubic meters a second of its flow, and channeling it through an 86-kilometer canal to the Veru River. The entire project was completed by January 1993. Meanwhile, the region's farming landscape was undergoing another transformation. The 1980s marked a shift from Velasco's lackluster cooperatives to small and mid-sized private landholdings, which had been purchased from the now civilian government. Once it became apparent that private estates were more productive and the cooperatives lacked the capital to scale up operations, the groundwork for larger landholdings had already been laid. Foreign investment began to increase significantly under Garcia, who was eager to see his pet project succeed. Yet it was during the neoliberal reforms of the highly controversial Alberto Fujimori, Peru's president from 1990 to 2000, that agro companies truly began to flock in. High-yield export crops like asparagus and tomatoes then put high-volume Peruvian agro-exports firmly on the map. Phase 2 took the project even further by extending the irrigation and hydroelectric infrastructure from Veru to Moche, adding another 66 kilometers to the main channel. In addition, 127 square kilometers of desert was transformed into arable land, and 90 kilometers of transmission lines were constructed to power the new agro-industrial zones. Perhaps the most popular and long-awaited milestone of this phase was the new infrastructure designed to channel drinking water to Peru's third-largest city, Trujillo. During the 1990s and early 2000s, land sales and private investment surged. 11 companies acquired most of the new farmland, with competitive bidding favoring those capable of investing quickly and heavily. Between 1995 and 2004, these investments generated more than $600 million in exports. It's no surprise that, from an investor's point of view, Chavimochic represented a gold mine. You've got cheap land that the state is eager to sell for regional and national development, abundant pools of low-wage manpower with lax labor laws, courtesy of Fujimori. You've got year-round production thanks to high, consistent temperatures between 20 and 26 Celsius, ideal for filling supply gaps in Europe and North America. Then you have excellent access to ports, especially Puerto Salaverry, which is located just 14 kilometers southeast of Trujillo. Add to that, legal reforms reducing barriers for both foreign and domestic capital, along with deregulation that makes it easier for private investors to enter agriculture. And of course, a brand spanking new irrigation system supplying cheap, consistent, and pressurized water, so no need to pump it. It was in many ways an agro-industrialist's dream, but by the mid-2010s, that dream collided with a big, fat reality check as Phase 3 became entangled in one of the most cataclysmic scandals in Latin American history. Spoiling the bunch. Now, according to the original blueprints, the third and final phase involved the further extension of the Mother Canal from Moche to Chicama, neatly rounding off the project's acronym. Its final leg ends at the Pampas de Uricape and includes 3 tunnels, 4 bridges with crossings over the Panamericana, and 146 automated delivery points. But the centerpiece of Phase 3 is, without a doubt, the 97-meter-high concrete-faced rock-filled dam at Palo Redondo, north of Chimbote. With a usable capacity of over 360 million cubic meters, it was designed to regulate the Santa River's flows year-round, serving both irrigation and hydroelectric power needs. By 2016, the dam was nearly 70% complete. Funding had been secured through a highly praised public-private partnership between the Peruvian state and a Brazilian construction giant, one with an impressive track record of Latin American megaprojects. You might remember this company as Odebrecht. Now, the Odebrecht scandal was absolute political jet fuel in Peru. As in around a dozen other countries in the region, the construction, chemicals, and engineering conglomerate had bribed legions of politicians and officials with tens of millions of dollars. All of this was aimed at snapping up lucrative infrastructure contracts. And when the scandal broke, it spread like wildfire across Latin America. In Peru alone, a total of 4 former presidents were implicated. 3 were arrested, and the 4th, Alan Garcia, took his own life in 2019 as the police were literally at his door. Resignations piled up across various branches of government, public works contracts were voided, funding was frozen, and projects were thrown into legal limbo. And this, of course, included Chavimochic. The government then began scrutinizing all public-private partnerships. New anti-corruption laws created a paralyzing amount of red tape, and the stench of Odebrecht meant few were willing to take on the tainted project. The result? Phase 3 was stalled for years, leading to losses of hundreds of millions and the prevention of tens of thousands of potential jobs generated. Fortunately, that changed in 2024. Phase 3 was revived not by a private entity, but by a national government. The Government of Canada. The Canadian Commercial Corporation signed a $750 million contract with Peru's Ministry of Agricultural Development and Irrigation to help complete the dam and provide technical assistance to the overall project. Once finished, which is projected for 2028, Chavimochic will become the largest drip irrigation project in the world. It will make nearly 630 square kilometers of desert land suitable for farming, in addition to 480 kilometers squared of existing farmland. And it's already paying off. Between 2011 and 2023, agricultural exports from La Libertad tripled from $400 million to $1.2 billion annually. When completed, the project is expected to generate around 150,000 jobs, benefiting both regional and national economy. Furthermore, about 40,000 families are expected to benefit from its drinking water supply. But one looming and dreaded question does remain: climate change. The entire project depends on the Santa River, which in turn relies on rainwater and glacial melt from the Andes. Deglaciation, rising temperatures, and erratic rain patterns pose serious risks to the region, both in terms of water scarcity and the potential for catastrophic flooding. A 2019 report from the World Bank warns that Peru's current strategies, including dams, reservoirs, underground water storage, among others, they're going to be insufficient by just 2030. Additionally, higher temperatures are going to increase evaporation in coastal Peru, reducing both surface water availability and groundwater recharge rates. Peru has got its work cut out for itself. Major reforms are needed to improve the country's water governance, especially in the dry Pacific Basin, where it has already invested millions to build an agricultural powerhouse designed to endure. In the case of Chavimochic, pressure is mounting for companies to invest further in local infrastructure. This includes building new reservoirs, constructing retaining walls for insurance, and implementing other adaptive measures. It's in everyone's interests to future-proof the region's lifeline. When life gives you lemons, sometimes you've got to industrialize the orchard, scale production, export the lemons by the ton, and gain enough capital to do it all over again, leaving just enough to tackle the bigger problem. Until then, the next time you're enjoying a perfectly ripe Peruvian avocado in the middle of January, or savoring Peruvian mangoes, mandarins, grapes, and asparagus, do remember that the odds are that it was grown and harvested on lands once barren and now blooming. With careful management, this vibrancy can continue, at least for the foreseeable future. If mismanaged, well, sand's never far away, is it? Thanks for watching.